Wilson Morales from Blacksman TV talking to Harry Lennix regarding his role as Solomon's sonny Jasper in the Broadway play Purpose. How's it going, Mr. Lennox?
Greg Wilson, great to be with you today.
Yes. So here we are. We have this play written by Branden Jacobs-Jenkins, directed by Phylicia Rashad. You're no stranger to doing theater, Broadway and off Broadway. What led you to say yes to taking on this role?
Well, I was looking for work, and
As we all are.
as we usually are when you're in this business. And my friend Glenn Davis from Steppenwolf happened to have the first half of a play, the first act of what had been commissioned 10 years ago, a play called Purpose. And I read it and was immediately compelled and went in knowing that play would be completed, hopefully, by the time we opened in Chicago at Steppenwolf. And it was. And it did rather well. And here we are today.
Mhm. So for those who don't know, obviously not everybody gets to come to New York and so forth, or saw it in Chicago. What is the play about?
Well, the play is,
There's a
you
lot
know,
going on.
there's a lot going on in the play, but it's a family dramedy, I would say. I call it a high comedy, but some people might call it a drama, and with a lot of biting humor that centers on a politically important family, a kind of civil rights legacy family. Many families might come to mind, but this is a composite of, of characters, and we get to see right after a pandemic, actually a couple of years after a pandemic, a family welcome to dinner a guest, and throughout the course of that dinner, many things are revealed, which are then explored, I think, very poetically by this magnificent playwright, Branden Jacobs-Jenkins. And so, I think people have compared it to Brandon's last play, Appropriate. They say this is the black version of that. Some people have compared it to August Osage County. Some people have compared it to Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. But it's its own play, and he's a unique American voice. And I think everybody who has come to see it would agree that this is an important new play.
Mhm. You know, the character you play, Solomon, is a famed politician, semi-retired. And obviously, as you mentioned, the other plays they may be compared to, whenever anybody, mostly family, gets together for dinner or whatever the occasion is, and whether it be a TV show, a movie, or a play, there's always drama that ensues. No family is perfect. In real life, what you see on the outside is not always the same on the inside. And so when you play in this role of Solomon, um, I always say everybody's flawed, but the question is, do they know it?
Mm.
And when you look at Solomon's character, what he in his actions, he feels he's justified in everything he's done. Do you see it that way?
Yes, um, it's interesting. I don't know that he thinks that he's been right all the time, but I think that certainly, I believe that he considers himself a reasonable man who is, in between eras, really. He's of a certain era and a way of things, a certain millennium, things the way things were done. 50 years ago, 40 years ago is quite different now. And I think he's out of step with the time. So I don't know that and I think he recognizes that. So I don't think that he considers himself flawless. I certainly think he's deeply flawed. Um, but I do believe that he's relatable, and he is in that sense what's called representative of a kind of uh, patriarch, a father in a family in an American system in Chicago at a certain time. And when that time is changing, when the landscape all around him is unsettled. So yeah, I think that that's the stuff of drama, and sometimes it's stuff of comedy. Somebody once described, I can't remember who it was. It might have been my teacher or something we read, but that in a comedy, the lead characters are smaller than the world around them, and they're finding their way in that world. In a tragedy, the lead characters are bigger than the world around them. They stomp on everything and sort of are overwhelming to a system. And so I think that this is this is a little bit of both. You know?
Mhm. You're playing opposite LaTANYA Richardson, who plays your wife, and you got a number of actors, too many to name as far as who play the kids and the girlfriends and the wives and so forth. And it is a comedy, and it's a credit to Branden because it's not easy to write a dramedy, especially for theater. You got to make sure that the comedic parts stick and that the audience gets it, and you're seeing that, you know. And so when you take this play, and there's a lot going on there in terms of like family and unity and sacrifice. I think, when you think of Solomon's case, in order to be the politician that he is, he had to sacrifice something. The question is, was it being the rightful father, the right husband? While he got his fame on the outside world, it wasn't so easy on the inside. And
Yep.
so when you look to see, as you were working with, you did the play in Chicago, has anything changed in transferring to Broadway in terms of demeanor?
No, I don't think so. Of course, it's changed because we have a couple of new castmates. We have, of course, LaTANYA Richardson Jackson, who you mentioned, of course, and Kara Young, who just won the Tony for Pearly Victorious last year. And, that's a different chemistry now with the ensemble that we had in Chicago. We got Glenn Davis, who I mentioned, Jon Michael Hill, and Alana Arenas. But but I think that the essential temperament, the characters are more or less the same. I think they've been clarified since we brought it here to New York, to Broadway, as should be the case. We've had more rehearsal and more rewrites and so on, and the whole purpose really is to evolve it as it moves along through time. And so I think they're a little clearer, but I think that their general thrust is the same.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When you're working opposite LaTanya, and I don't know if you've worked with her before, or if you've known her, what is that dynamic? How's the rehearsal process like? So for you guys to establish that chemistry so that we, the audience, can see that this is a couple and not just reading lines.
Yeah, well, I've had the great pleasure of working with LaTanya before. I think the first time we worked together was I was directing a reading in a thing called Project One Voice, which I'm sure you're aware of, which is the Black theater companies across America do the same play on one night. They read it in their respective cities. And LaTanya and I had the opportunity to do, with me directing and her playing Miss, Mayor, the lead character in Trouble in Mind, the Alice Childers play. So that was the first time we worked together. And then we did August Wilson, uh, if you will, in rep at the Kennedy Center in 2008, where very many luminary actors, August Wilsonian actors, such as Heather Alicia Sims and Linda Gravatt and the great Anthony Chisholm and Stephen McKinley Henderson. The list goes on, like a who's who. And LaTanya and I were in that company of that, and we both did seven guitars. And so this is
So
our
just to say, you guys have a shorthand in working
yeah.
together. Freaking
Yeah,
frat,
we
like
love
you
it.
go, I go. So okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
that's it.
That's great.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then coming back to doing Broadway, how long did it take for you to get your legs back and your rhythm in terms of not only just, you've been an actor for years, but to do Broadway, to do 8 shows a week, and to be on, you have to always be on. At what point did you say, okay, I'm ready to go?
Yes, well, fortunately, the Steppenwolf Theater is, we call that the jaws of the wolf. They train you up pretty good. We were doing 7 shows a week last year this time, and so that's a pretty good preparation. I also got to do Inherit the Wind this past fall, and that was 8 times a week at the Goodman in Chicago. So I feel ready, in that sense. But before I did this play at the Steppenwolf last year, it had been 16 or 17 years since I'd been on a stage as an actor. And so that was rigorous, having to get ready for that, get that stage rust off, which I think those 3 months helped me do.
Now you said as an actor you've directed plays as well. So when you're coming back in front of the screen, and you you know it's like it's one thing. It's a difference between when you're doing a TV show or a film where you're like, oh, let's go again. Because whether you messed up your lines or so, can't do that on theater. You got to be ready to go. Otherwise, we the audience will hear it like, oh, you have rehearsals, and you're like, okay, we got it to a point. It's a mechanism in your brain that like you got to do over and over again. So like. And for this show, which is nearly 3 hours, that's a lot. It's a lot to be in there. Now, granted, you don't have every scene, but you're in the scene, and so like there's a lot to go on. Um, and so when you first started doing it, was it the same length in Chicago as well?
Yes, it was about the same running time. Yeah, it was about that.
you know. And so, what's the joy that you get from doing theater back to back to back, as opposed to like I'm sure there are other things that may be thrown at you or that you may want to audition, but when you know you do theater, there's a long commitment to it.
There is a long commitment. At this, I haven't had the problem of somebody enticing me away from the theater with some magnificent film part or something. Um, Although I did get to work with Mario Van Peebles, I think in July of last year, which was great, but it wasn't competing with the plays. But it's been great, to reacclimate myself to the theater and to get into the discipline of it, the 8 times, 8 shows every week, giving the
Mhm.
audience the same quality of performance. If you know, that's what we endeavor to do, and we've had great audiences. So you know, it's been it's been good to get back in it. I
Mhm.
was away for too long, I think. Yeah.
Is there anything that you're getting out of doing theater from different shows and obviously working with Brandon the second time that helps you skill set wise as an actor? Even though you've been doing this for a long time, you've been in front of the screen and behind the screen, But I always say actors can never stop learning.
Hmm.
And even though you're doing the same performance every day, is there anything new you're getting out of each performance?
Yes, I think that that's the real joy of, having chance night after night to do it again. You get to correct things that didn't go so right or it could have been better, at least the night before. Sometimes other things slip away, but that's the kind of craft that it is, repeated performance, supposedly, hopefully gives you uh, cleaner results and so on.
Hmm.
So yes, I think that there's no question that the training in the theater or a life in the theater, in my opinion, depending on the kind of movie that you're doing, is a benefit. It gives you the fundamentals. You have to have consistency whether you're on stage or screen. You have to be able to be, understood, comprehensible. You have to be able to repeat performance with a certain level of consistency with the multiple takes and all of that. So it's not like you just, film is easy. It's a very difficult craft to,
Hmm.
to to study. Yeah. So yeah. It,
Speaking of movies, sidetracking for a bit. Today, April 21st, happens to be the 25th anniversary of One Area of Films, Love and Basketball, which was directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood. You were in that film. There were a bevy of talent that were in that film that have gone on, who because we now know, a lot of us know who they are, especially those who were in front of the screen and behind the screen. What's your memory of making that film with Gina?
well, there was a great deal of I didn't know it had been 25 years. I thought it was actually longer than that, but I think Gina called me when it turned 20. We had a conversation. Of course, it brought back a flood of wonderful memories. You point out some of the luminaries, such as Alfre Woodard, who I just saw. She came to see Purpose, and my friend, of course, Sanaa Lathan and Regina Hall, and you name it, Dennis Haysbert. um, Debbie Morgan, a veritable list of all stars there. And so really good memories. I remember where I was living at the time, and my brother got a chance to come to the set with his family, and to meet the actors that I named, and they got to see how Hollywood worked, and it was a very good time.
You know, and that leads me to ask, that film, obviously going back to the Five Heartbeats, you've worked for over 30 years, and you've done a lot, and you just continue to do more. For anybody that looks at your career that may want to start emulating, like, oh, I want to start working like Harry Lennix because he's found a way to stay the game, to stay working. What do you tell aspiring actors as far as how to stay relevant? Not, I wouldn't say relevant, but how to stay in the game, because it doesn't always easy. Like we may see you here and there, but that doesn't mean, there are off times. Everybody has an off time.
Right. Well, it's just part of it is just longevity, the ability to get in things that endure. There's only a very few shows that have been on for 10 years, like The Blacklist, for example, but that has nothing to do with me. That's just I was on a show that lasted that long, or to have been in some of those early plays in places like Chicago. So I was in the right time and in the right place, where there was less competition in Chicago than in, say, New York or LA when I was there. So I got a chance to play those roles that I might not otherwise have had a chance to play if I were in a bigger market with bigger names and so on. So my thing that I give advice is, to study. There's a passage in, I think, First Timothy, might be Second Timothy. Study to show thyself approved unto the Lord, it says. And I take that, to heart, that you have to learn this craft and you have to be in a place where you are able to apply what it is that you're learning, such as in a city where you get a chance to do these kinds of roles. So that's really what uh, I don't know if it was a strategy, but that's what circumstance led me to do. Um, but I have friends who, for example, want to do film and television. They move to places like Atlanta, where the less dense market, or even to Toronto, where there's always a call and a need because people are shooting there for actors that can look and appear to be American and so forth. So there are ways around whatever limitations you have. If you want to work, and I think you have to be honest with yourself. Do you want to be a working actor? Or do you want to be a star and a rich and famous diva, or do you want to be a working actor? And I think if you want to be a working actor, you can work, and there are a lot of places to do that. But you have to be willing to adapt to, and willing to accept moving and finding the work.
Mhm. Before I let you go, and going back to Purpose, this is a great time on Broadway for a lot of folks of color. We've got Purpose here, pretty much, an all black cast. We've got Denzel doing Othello, we've got Audra doing Gypsy, we got Adrienne Warren in the last 5 years, and so on and so on. There's a lot of folks we can come out on Broadway to come see, which leads me to ask, why should folks come out and see Purpose?
Well, I think Purpose is distinct from the other offerings that you listed there, insofar as it's Black on purpose. Do you mean to not to quote the title itself, but it is about the Black experience here in the United States of America at this time. And I think that to that extent, while all of those entertainments would be enjoyable and I'm sure are being very well supported, I'm glad about that. I'm glad there's a robust season on Broadway for people of color and in general, and for Broadway in general. It's long overdue, and I think Broadway is back, it seems, and it's great to be a part of it. But I think that frankly, I think Purpose is something new. It's a breath of fresh air. It's not a revival. It is not something that we've seen other versions of now with Black people in it. This is, I think, something that is Black now that could be one day appropriated, if you will, by other cultures. I can see a Japanese Purpose, German Purpose. It's that relevant, I think, and that identifiable. So yeah, I think this is something new, and if people are, in the mood for that, then I think we're your ticket. And of course, if you like the other stuff, I'm glad that that's on offer too.
Mr. Lennox, it's been a pleasure to speak with you. Obviously, I know you're off today, but hey, have yourself a great day. We'll see you back on stage, anywhere else, down the road, I'm sure. But let's hope this has a good run. That you continue to do this, and people come out and support you. And I'm sure we'll talk down the road on projects that you may have after the play's over. So have yourself a
Great.
great
Well,
day. We'll talk down the road.
thank you. Take care.
Take care.